The Council of Surviving Worlds convened for what everyone suspected would be the last time. I floated in my containment sphere, watching the holographic projections flicker across the chamber. Hearts, 12 species, had attended the first emergency session 6 cycles ago. Now, only 4 remained. The empty pedestals where the others once stood served as silent monuments to the speed of our extinction. The quarantine protocol has failed, announced High Arbiter Veln, her 3 eye stalks drooping with exhaustion. The purple bioluminescence that normally pulsed across her carapace had dimmed to almost nothing. She looked like she had aged 100 solar rotations in mere days. No one argued. What was the point? The plague, capital P intentional, had torn through the galactic community like nothing we had ever witnessed. It wasn't a virus, not in any traditional sense. It was adaptive, intelligent, and absolutely merciless. It studied each species, learned their biology, and then systematically destroyed them from the inside out. The Kotharians were first, a species of silicon-based warriors who had never known disease, who had conquered 17 star systems through sheer military might. The plague liquefied their crystalline structures in less than 48 hours. I had seen the footage. I wished I hadn't. Then came the Morphix Collective, a hive mind spanning 4 billion individuals across 6 planets. The plague severed their neural connections one by one, forcing them to experience individuality and isolation for the first time in their evolutionary history. Most went insane within minutes. The rest simply stopped functioning, their bodies collapsing like puppets with cut strings. The Zephyrites tried to escape into their gaseous forms, dispersing across their home nebula. The plague followed them into vapor state. Clever bastard. We have exhausted every scientific avenue, continued Veln, her voice barely above a whisper. Every medical protocol, every quantum treatment, every biological countermeasure. The plague adapts faster than we can respond. I watched Crix, the last surviving member of the Thornback species, scratch anxiously at his armored scales. He had lost his entire family clutch 3 days ago, 27 offspring, gone in the span of a morning. He had not spoken since. There is one possibility we have not yet explored, said Veln, and something in her tone made my internal fluids run cold. No, I said, immediately. Absolutely not. Specialist Qree, we must consider every option. Every reasonable option, yes.
But this is insanity.
Veln's eye stalk swiveled toward me with an intensity that made me shrink back in my sphere. We are facing extinction, Qree. All of us. Every sentient species in the known galaxy is dying. Insanity might be exactly what we need. They are primitives, I protested, feeling my chromatophores shift to agitated orange. They have barely achieved faster than light travel. Their medicine is crude, their technology laughable compared to ours. They still use physical currency on some of their continents, for crying out loud. They are also, interrupted Veln, the only carbon-based oxygen-breathing warm-blooded species we have not yet observed being infected. That stopped me cold. What are you talking about? The plague has consumed dozens of species matching that description. Check the data logs yourself, Veln said, projecting a scrolling list of infected species across the chamber. Every warm-blooded oxygen breather in the northern quadrants. All 17 of them gone within the first 2 cycles. The southern sectors lost 23 species of similar composition. But there is one planet, one single world, that matches all these parameters and shows 0 infection rates despite being in a high-traffic trade route. My containment sphere's display terminal flickered to life, showing me the file she had transmitted. I absorbed the information, feeling my skepticism slowly morph into something else, something uncomfortable. Earth, I said finally. You want to go to Earth? I want to send you to Earth, Veln corrected. Your specialty is xenobiology and cross-species pathology. If anyone can determine why the humans remain unaffected, it would be you. And if I become infected during the investigation, then you die, just like the rest of us will die if we do nothing. Veln's tone was not cruel, just devastatingly practical. At least this way your death might serve a purpose. I could not argue with that logic, much as I wanted to. 3 hours later, I was aboard the research vessel's steady approach, trying very hard not to think about how that name had proven grimly ironic for the last 6 missions that had used this ship. All those crews were dead now, of course. I was the only living thing on board, unless you counted the algae cultures in the hydroponics bay, and honestly, I was not entirely sure those had not been infected too. The plague was getting creative. The journey to Earth's solar system took 4 days via quantum skip drive, 4 days of isolation, reviewing every scrap of data we had on humanity, trying to understand what made them different. Spoiler alert, they seemed aggressively, almost offensively normal. Humans were not particularly strong. The Keltharians could lift 300 times their body weight. Humans struggled with twice their own mass. Humans were not especially intelligent. Their average cognitive processing speed ranked somewhere in the middle of known sentient species. The Morphix Collective could perform calculations in their sleep that would take human supercomputers years to process. Humans were not even notably resilient. Their bodies were fragile, prone to damage, susceptible to thousands of different diseases and disorders. They could be killed by simple mineral deficiencies, for stars' sake. And yet here they were, happily spinning around their little yellow sun, completely oblivious to the fact that a galaxy-wide extinction event was occurring just a few dozen light-years away. I emerged from quantum skip at the edge of their solar system and immediately activated my passive sensors. No point in announcing my presence until I understood what I was dealing with. The first thing I noticed was the sheer amount of debris. These humans were messy. Satellites, old rocket stages, defunct probes, all of it just floating around their planet like a junkyard in space. How they managed to launch anything without hitting their own garbage was beyond me. The second thing I noticed was the chatter. So much chatter. Radio signals, television broadcasts, internet data packets, all of it screaming out into the void with absolutely no regard for who might be listening. It was like watching someone walk through a dark forest while banging pots and pans together and shouting, "Here I am, please eat me." I spent 2 full days just listening to their communications, trying to build a psychological profile. What I found was equal parts fascinating and disturbing. Humans were contradictory, violent yet compassionate, logical yet superstitious. They could create breathtaking art, and then bomb each other over differences in religious interpretation. They could split atoms and build space stations, but millions of them still believed their planet was flat. They were also, I realized with growing unease, absolutely terrifying. Not in the way the Keltharians were terrifying, with their military precision and overwhelming firepower. Humans were terrifying because they simply did not stop, ever. I found records of human history, public domain archives that any species could access. I read about wars that lasted decades, about soldiers who kept fighting despite horrific injuries, about entire populations that rebuilt from literal ashes, again and again and again. There was a phrase they used: humanity. Fuck yeah. It appeared in their entertainment media, their motivational speeches, their casual conversation, a crude expression of species pride that bordered on delusional self-confidence. And maybe, just maybe, that was the key. On the third day, I detected something that made my containment fluid freeze solid. A ship, not human. Definitely not human. The biosignature was Morphix, or at least it had been Morphix once. Now it was something else. Something wrong. The plague had reached Earth's system. The infected vessel drifted past Mars, heading directly for Earth's orbital space. I watched through my sensors as it approached, as it was detected by human monitoring systems, as their military apparatus swung into action with surprising speed. Unidentified craft. This is NORAD Space Command, came a transmission in standard Galactic trade language, which surprised me. You are entering restricted space. Identify yourself immediately, or you will be engaged. The infected ship did not respond. It simply continued its steady approach. I watched 3 human spacecraft launch from their orbital stations, military vessels. Primitive by galactic standards, but functional. They moved to intercept, weapons systems powering up. "This is your final warning," said the human voice, now edged with steel. "Turn back or we will open fire." The infected ship accelerated. What happened next took approximately 47 seconds. The humans fired first, kinetic weapons that punched through the infected vessel's shields like they were not even there. The ship listed, trailing atmosphere and biological matter. Any sane species would have retreated. The plague was not sane. The infected vessel crashed through the defensive perimeter, taking fire from all 3 human craft. It was dying, disintegrating under the barrage, but it only needed to get close enough to transmit the plague to Earth's biosphere. 50 kilometers from Earth's atmosphere. One of the human vessels rammed it. Just rammed it, at full speed. The explosion was visible from my position at the outer system. Both ships vanished in a ball of plasma and debris. The other two human craft immediately moved to intercept the wreckage, using some kind of energy weapon to incinerate every piece large enough to survive atmospheric entry. The explosion was visible from my position at the outer system. Both ships vanished in a ball of plasma and debris. I checked the crew manifest for the ship that had performed the ramming maneuver. 37 humans had been aboard. 37 beings who had just committed suicide to protect their planet from a threat they did not even understand. That was when I realized something crucial. The plague killed by adaptation. It studied. It learned. It optimized its attack for each species' specific biology and psychology. But how do you optimize an attack against a species that views self-sacrifice as a viable tactical option? How do you demoralize a species that jokes about its own mortality? How do you break a species that has literally looked at the concept of impossible and said challenge accepted? That needed to get closer. I needed samples, data, direct observation. I needed to land on Earth. This was either going to answer every question we had, or it was going to kill me in some new and exciting way that the plague had not yet demonstrated. Knowing my luck, probably both. I initiated my descent vector toward their North American continent, specifically toward a region their databases identified as Colorado. It housed several major medical research facilities and, according to my scans, at least 3 separate military installations. If I was going to solve this mystery, I would need access to human medical expertise, and if I was wrong about everything, well, at least the military installations would make my death relatively quick. The steady approach broke atmosphere over the Rocky Mountains at exactly 0347 local time. Every alarm system on the planet probably started screaming the moment I crossed the Kármán line. Time to see if humans were as curious as their broadcast suggested, or if they would simply shoot first and ask questions never. I transmitted a message in their dominant language. This is Research Specialist Qree of the Council of Surviving Worlds. I am not hostile. I require assistance. Please do not incinerate me. Then I waited. Turns out, humans were very good at surrounding things with overwhelming firepower. Within 6 minutes of landing, I counted 47 armed personnel, 12 armored vehicles, and at least 3 aircraft circling overhead. A voice boomed from external speakers. Exit your vessel with all manipulator appendages visible. I activated my translation matrix and responded, I do not have manipulator appendages. I am suspended in a liquid medium within a containment sphere. Exiting my vessel means rolling down the access ramp. Please do not shoot the sphere. It is the only thing keeping me alive in your atmosphere. There was a long pause. Copy that. Roll down slowly. Any sudden movements, and we will engage. Fair enough. I opened the cargo bay door and carefully maneuvered my containment sphere onto the ramp. The humans tensed, weapons tracking my every movement. I tried to look as non-threatening as possible, which was difficult when you are essentially a floating ball of sentient jelly. Progressed ground without being shot. Progress. A human stepped forward, and I got my first real look at one of them outside of video recordings. She was tall by their standards, with dark skin and eyes that missed absolutely nothing. Her uniform identified her as Commander E. Martinez, and she carried herself with the kind of confidence that came from extensive combat experience. I am Commander Martinez, United States Space Force, she said, her weapon still pointed at my sphere. You said you need assistance. Explain, quickly, why I should not consider you a threat. Because, I said, in approximately 6 to 8 weeks, possibly less, every human on this planet will be dead, unless we figure out why you are not already dead. That got their attention. Commander Martinez stared at my containment sphere for a solid 10 seconds before responding. I could practically see her brain processing whether I was insane, lying, or telling a truth so terrible she wished I was lying. Elaborate, she said finally, her weapon still trained on me but her trigger finger relaxing slightly. You have 2 minutes before I decide you are a threat. The galaxy is dying, I said, keeping my voice as steady as possible, despite the 12 sniper rifles I could detect aimed at various points on my sphere. A pathogen we call the plague has eliminated 43 sentient species in the last 6 cycles, approximately 18 of your weeks. It adapts to any biology it encounters, learns weaknesses and exploits them with 100% lethality. Then you came here because humans are the only oxygen-breathing, carbon-based, warm-blooded species that has not been infected despite being in a high-traffic region of space. Your immunity makes no sense. We need to understand why before the plague finishes studying you and adapts. Martinez glanced at one of her subordinates. A thin man with nervous eyes and insignia that marked him as some kind of science officer. Dr. Reeves, is this possible? Reeves stepped forward, his instrument scanner already active, and pointed at my sphere. Commander, I am detecting a biosignature that matches nothing in our database. The containment sphere is reading as a self-sustaining biotic environment. If this is a hoax, it is the most elaborate one in human history. Not a hoax, I said. Unfortunately for both of us, very much real. Martinez lowered her weapon slightly. Why should we trust you? For all we know, you brought this plague here. The plague arrived 3 days ago, I said. I detected an infected Morphix vessel entering your system. Your military destroyed it before it could reach your planet. You rammed it with a crude spacecraft and incinerated the debris. 37 humans died in that engagement. The color drained from Martinez's face. That information is classified. How do you know about Operation Barrier? Because I was watching, I said. I have been observing your planet for 72 hours trying to understand what makes you different. That incident confirms something I suspected. Humans are either the bravest species I have ever encountered, or the most aggressively suicidal. Possibly both. Those were heroes, Martinez said quietly, her jaw tight. They saved 8 billion lives. Exactly my point, I said. What species sacrifices 37 members without hesitation to save the rest? The Morphix Collective would have calculated the statistical value of those lives and debated for hours. The Caltharians would have demanded glory and compensation for the families. Humans just did it. Reeves was typing frantically on a handheld device. Commander, if what this being says is true, we need to get it to US Amrid immediately. If there is a galactic pandemic and we have natural immunity, understanding that immunity could save lives. Well, Reeves was typing frantically on a handheld device. Or, said Martinez, this could be an elaborate infiltration attempt. Then shoot me now and learn nothing, I said, surprising myself with my own boldness. Or take the risk. Study me. Study the data I have brought, and possibly save your species along with what remains of mine. Your choice, Commander. But choose quickly. The plague does not wait for committee decisions. Martinez studied me for another long moment, then holstered her weapon. You are coming with us. You are coming with us. But understand this. If you make one hostile move, one attempt at deception, I will personally ensure you spend the rest of your very short life in a containment cell so small you will forget what space looks like. Clear? Extremely clear, I said. Thank you for not shooting me. Day is not over yet, she replied, but I detected a hint of dark humor in her tone. Humans, I was learning, laughed at danger. This was either admirable or insane. I still had not decided which. They transported me to a facility they called Fort Detrick, a sprawling complex in Maryland dedicated to biological defense. For the entire journey, I was surrounded by armed guards, multiple redundant containment protocols, and enough firepower to sterilize a small moon. These humans did not take chances. I respected that. Dr. Reeves had apparently called ahead because when we arrived, a full team of scientists and military personnel was waiting. They moved my containment sphere into a level 4 biocontainment laboratory, the kind of place humans built to study their own worst diseases. I provided them with everything. Genetic samples, which required carefully extracting a portion of my own cellular material through a painful process I would rather not repeat. Complete data files on every species the plague had consumed. Detailed bioanalysis of the plague's adaptive mechanisms. Quite. The rabies, the Materate Keller teaser chain, holographic projections of infection progressions. The humans absorbed it all with an intensity that bordered on obsessive. Dr. Reeves led the research team. A collection of the brightest medical minds Earth had to offer. There was Dr. Amanda Okoye, a virologist from Nigeria who had spent 20 years studying Ebola and could recite viral mutation rates in her sleep. Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka, a Japanese immunologist whose work on adaptive immune responses had won him their planet's most prestigious science awards. And Dr. Yara Petrov, a Russian geneticist who looked at the plague data with the kind of cold analytical focus that reminded me uncomfortably of the plague itself. This is extraordinary, Okoye said, her eyes wide as she reviewed the holographic display of a Caltharian infection sequence. The pathogen does not just adapt, it predicts. It models the biological responses before they occur. It learns faster than any defense can be mounted, I explained. By the time a species develops a countermeasure, the plague has already adapted to 17 variations of that countermeasure, and prepared responses to each. "So how do we beat it?" asked Tanaka, leaning forward intently. "That," I said, "is why I am here. You tell me." Petrov laughed, a sharp bark of sound that made everyone jump. "You came to Earth to humans to solve a problem that has defeated 43 more advanced civilizations?" "Yes," I said simply. "Because you are still alive." That shut her up. They worked for 16 hours straight. No breaks, no sleep, just constant analysis and debate. I watched them argue, saw them challenge each other's hypotheses with a viciousness that would have caused actual physical combat among my own species. But when one of them made a breakthrough, the others immediately built upon it, all rivalry forgotten in pursuit of the answer. It was Okoye who first noticed the pattern. "Look at this," she said, projecting a comparison chart across the main display. "Every species the plague has infected shares one commonality. Their immune systems are highly specialized. Evolution optimized them for their specific environment, their specific threats." "Of course," said Tanaka, "that is how evolution works. But look at human immunity," Okoye continued, pulling up genetic markers. "We are messy. Our immune system responds to threats that do not even exist on Earth. We have defenses against proteins we have never encountered. Our bodies maintain antibodies for diseases that went extinct thousands of years ago." "Evolutionary baggage," said Petrova, dismissively. "Genetic inefficiency. Or," I said slowly, understanding dawning, "evolutionary paranoia." They all turned to look at me. "Explain," said Reeves. "Humans are not optimized," I said, my excitement growing. "You are prepared. Your immune system does not wait to see what threatens you. It assumes everything is a threat, and maintains defenses against possibilities, not just realities." "That is insanely inefficient," said Protokov. "That is insanely effective," countered Okoye. "When the plague attacks, it expects to encounter a logical immune response, something it can model and counter. But human immunity is not logical. It is chaotic, redundant, excessive. We over-engineer our defenses," said Tanaka, a grin spreading across his face. "The plague cannot predict our response because we are defending against attacks it has not even planned yet." They felt something I had not experienced in weeks.
Hope?
"There is more," said Reeves, pulling up another dataset. "Human psychology. Qree, you mentioned the Morphix Collective went insane when the plague severed their hive connection. The Zephyrites panicked when it invaded their gaseous forms. Every species has a psychological vulnerability the plague exploits." "Correct," I said. "It does not just kill bodies, it breaks minds." "So what is humanity's psychological vulnerability?" asked Petrov. The room fell silent. "That is the problem," I said quietly. "I have been studying humans for days. You have thousands of psychological vulnerabilities. You are terrified of death, yet you court it constantly. You crave social connection, yet you isolate yourselves. You need purpose, yet you question everything. You should be easy to break." "But we are not at it," said Martinez, who had been standing quietly in the corner listening. "Because we have been breaking ourselves for thousands of years. War, famine, plague, we have survived all of it. Not because we are strong, but because we refuse to quit." "Spite," I said, testing the word. "You survive out of spite." "Spite, stubbornness, determination. Pick your word," said Martinez with a shrug. "Bottom line, we are too stupid to know when we should give up." Okoye laughed. "She is not wrong. Human history is full of battles we should have lost, disasters we should not have survived, obstacles we should not have overcome, but we are still here. So the plague," said Tanaka slowly, "is facing a species that is biologically chaotic and psychologically too stubborn to break. And," added Reeves, "a species that will absolutely sacrifice itself if it means taking the threat down too. We have the immune system data now. We can synthesize it, create a vaccine framework that other species can adapt. Even if it kills the researchers who develop it," I said, understanding fully now. "Even if confirmed, Martinez. We do not leave our people behind and we do not let threats survive. Not when we can do something about it." When floated in my sphere, absorbing this, these humans, these violent, contradictory, impossible humans were offering to save the galaxy. Not for glory, not for payment, not for political advantage, just because it needed doing. "You are all insane," I said finally. "Probably," agreed Okoye cheerfully. "Now let us get to work." Over the next 3 weeks, I watched humanity mobilize with a speed and efficiency that would have impressed the Caltharian military. Research labs on 6 continents began working on the vaccine framework. Manufacturing facilities retooled for mass production. Military vessels prepared for deployment missions to surviving worlds. The human government made one decision that stunned me. They released all the data publicly. Every scientist on Earth could access the research, contribute ideas, check the work. The concept of hoarding information during a crisis was apparently alien to them, though they practiced it religiously in peacetime. Humans were contradictory right to the end. Dr. Okoye led the breakthrough. Her team successfully synthesized a vaccine compound based on human immune chaos theory. The treatment would not cure infected individuals. Nothing could save them once the plague took hold, but it would prevent new infections by essentially teaching other species' immune systems to be paranoid like human immunity. It is not elegant, Okoye admitted, reviewing the final formulation. Recipients will experience heightened immune responses for the rest of their lives. They will be more susceptible to allergies, autoimmune reactions, all the problems human immunity deals with. But they will be alive, I said. But they will be alive, she confirmed. The first test came when Arbiter Veln arrived on Earth, her diplomatic vessel limping into orbit on failing systems. She was dying, the plague already beginning its work on her biology. We had perhaps 48 hours. They brought her to Fort Detrick, placed her in containment next to mine, and administered the first dose of the vaccine. Then we waited. For 6 hours, nothing happened. Veln's condition continued deteriorating. I watched her eye stalks droop, her bioluminescence fade. I prepared myself for the worst. Then, at hour 7, her color began to return. At hour 9, her eye stalks lifted. At hour 12, she was weak but stable. The plague's progression completely halted. It worked, Veln whispered. Her voice filled with wonder. Stars above, it actually worked. Reeves was already preparing mass production protocols. We can have enough vaccine for the surviving populations within 6 weeks. My team has worked out distribution logistics with the military. 6 weeks, I said. The plague could consume the remaining species in that time. Then we move faster, said Martinez simply. Welcome to human problem solving. When the timeline is impossible, we make it possible anyway. She was not exaggerating. Humans could apparently function indefinitely on stimulants, stubbornness, and what they called pizza. I watched research teams work 100-hour weeks. I saw factory workers volunteer for extra shifts without being asked. I observed military personnel plan distribution runs that would take them directly into plague-infected space with minimal chance of return. No one was forcing them. They just did it. The vaccine distribution began 4 weeks and 2 days after my arrival on Earth. Human vessels, carrying both the vaccine and human medical teams, jumped to every surviving world. They administered treatment, taught local medical staff the protocols, and left supplies for future doses. But some of those ships never came back. The plague got them, or pirates did, or mechanical failures in deep space, but enough returned to mark the missions as successful. Within 3 months, the plague spread had stopped completely. Within 6 months, infected individuals were quarantined, and the disease began to die out from lack of new hosts. Humanity had saved the galaxy. The Council of Surviving Worlds reformed with 22 species in attendance. 8 had been saved from the brink of extinction by human intervention. Veln herself had recovered fully, though she now suffered from what humans called hay fever and complained constantly about pollen. I floated in my sphere before the Council, preparing to deliver my final report. Humanity, I began, is not special because they are strong. They are not special because they are intelligent. They are special because they are too stubborn to accept defeat and too compassionate to abandon others, even when survival dictates they should. They also, added Veln with a smile, charge absolutely nothing for saving the galaxy. No territory demands, no political concessions, no technological exchanges. They simply ask that we remember what happened here and work together in the future. So what do we do? Asked Crix, the Thornback who had remained silent for so long. How do we repay a debt that cannot be repaid? We learn from them, I said. We study not just their biology but their philosophy. We understand that survival is not about being the strongest or the smartest. It is about refusing to quit. The Council voted unanimously to establish formal diplomatic relations with Earth, to share our technologies, to invite them into the galactic community as equal partners. The humans accepted. though they did make one unusual request. "We want you to be ready next time," said Martinez during the signing ceremony. "Not just for plagues but for anything. Because there will always be a next time. That is how the universe works." "And you will be there to face it with us?" asked Vanel. "Of course," said Martinez, as if the question was ridiculous. "That is what allies do." I remained on Earth for another year, working with human researchers, learning their methods, understanding their approach to impossible problems. When I finally returned to my home world, I brought with me not just medical knowledge but something more valuable. I brought hope. My species had nearly given up. We had accepted our extinction as inevitable. But humans taught us that inevitability is just another obstacle to overcome, that death is just another enemy to fight, and that the universe only wins if you let it. 5 years later, another crisis emerged. A quantum anomaly threatened to destabilize the entire sector. The response was immediate and coordinated. Every species contributed what they could, but it was humanity that led the charge, quite literally flying ships into the anomaly's event horizon to plant stabilization devices. 20 ships went in. 18 came back. At the memorial service, Martinez, now promoted to admiral, gave a speech that I will never forget. "We do not do this because we are fearless," she said, looking out at the assembled representatives from 40 different worlds. "We do this because we are terrified. Terrified of losing what we have built. Terrified of letting down those who depend on us. Terrified of a universe where we stood by and did nothing. So we act, we fight, we sacrifice. Not because it is easy, but because it is necessary. That is the human way. And if you are standing with us, it is your way too." The council chambers erupted in what I can only describe as cross-species applause. I floated in my containment sphere, watching species that had once been strangers come together as allies, as friends, as family. All because a group of primitive primates from a backwater planet decided that extinction was not an acceptable outcome and built a civilization on spite, stubbornness, and an absolute refusal to quit. The humanity indeed. Years from now, when historians study this era, they will see the data, the battles, the political maneuverings, but they will miss the essential truth that I learned during those terrifying months. The plague killed every species it encountered because it could predict them. It understood their strengths and exploited their weaknesses. It was logical, efficient, unstoppable. Until it met a species that was none of those things. Humans do not make sense. Their immune systems are paranoid messes. Their psychology is a contradiction. Their tactics involve ramming expensive spacecraft into threats just to make a point. They should not work. But they do. Stars help us all, they do. I filed my final report with the council last week. 3 simple words that summarized everything I had learned, everything I had witnessed, everything humanity had proven. Humanity? Fuck yeah. Velna approved it without changes. She understood. Sometimes the most important scientific discoveries are not about understanding why something works. They are about accepting that it works, and being grateful for it. Earth continues spinning around its little yellow sun. Humans continue being contradictory, violent, compassionate, impossible beings. And the galaxy continues surviving, not because we found the perfect solution, but because one species decided that survival was non-negotiable, and dragged the rest of us along with them. I still visit Earth regularly. The research continues, the partnerships strengthen, the friendship deepens, and every time I leave, every time my ship breaks orbit and heads for the stars, I look back at that blue and green world and think the same thing. Thank the stars for human stubbornness. Thank the stars for human chaos. Thank the stars that when the galaxy was dying, when hope was lost, when extinction seemed inevitable, there was one species crazy enough to say no. One species that looked at impossible odds and saw a challenge. One species that faced galactic extinction and responded with determination, sacrifice, and inappropriate humor. One species that proved survival is not about being the strongest or the smartest. It is about being too damn stubborn to die. The plague learned that lesson too late, and the galaxy learned it just in time.